Hey gang, so I want to show you how to set up your layers for the second week assignment. When you open up a new Rhino file, you're going to get a set of just standard layer conventions that will come up, and we're going to modify those. So when you open a new file, you get a default layer and you get 5 additional neutral layers. And you'll see that within this layer panel, it will look a little bit different on the PC side. This is from the Windows side. But you'll see that you have several bits of information that are all describing aspects of what is going on with a particular layer. The first thing you'll notice is the name. And if I want to change the name, I just double click and I can type XYZ. I can change the layer to anything that I want. So I can change the layer names. You will be doing that in your assignment. And if I want a new layer, I'm simply going to press the plus. It's giving me a new layer 6. It just popped in kind of spontaneously under the layer I was using. And I can rename all of these layers. The second column is showing you which layer is active. By default, the default layer will be active. So when you're wanting to go and put information, objects, make drawings on layers, you're simply going to move from layer to layer. And whatever layer you have selected is the layer that you'll be drawing on. So you will notice in the third column that I have different colors indicated. Those are going to be my display colors. So if I had layer 4 selected and I drew a simple rectangle, it's going to indicate green. It's going to show green because I'm on layer 4. If I changed to layer 3 and drew another rectangle, you'll see that that is going to come in blue because that's the blue layer. So that'll give you a little bit of insight if you're drawing and you're not sure which layer you're on. It's really helpful to see the layers, the objects appearing in different colors. But you can also very easily move objects from layer to layer. So if I am trying to draw on layer 4 and I notice that I've drawn on the wrong layer and I need to move this object to layer 4, I can simply select the object and I can come over here to layer 4, and with my left hand click I can get a drop down menu that includes move objects to this layer, and by doing that I've now moved that object back to layer 4. Now I'm still active on layer 3, so I would want to switch over and get into the layer I want to be drawing on. So the name, which layer is active, what the display color is. The next column is showing me the visibility. So if the light bulb is turned on, the layer is visible. If the light bulb is turned off, I'm actually hiding that layer. So if let's switch very quickly, make another rectangle in layer 3, and then you'll see that it's now active, but if I turned off the green layer, my green objects would disappear. And that's very helpful if you're trying to isolate information and just control certain parts of the drawing. But let's make everything visible for now, and now I see everything. The fifth column is whether or not I want to have a layer editable or locked. So if I am certain that this layer is complete, maybe the green layer is complete, I love where everything is, everything is drawn correctly, I might lock that layer so that if I go in and I start to move objects on other layers, I can't even select those objects because they are locked. I can also lock individual objects. If I unlock this, now I can select it again. But if I want to really lock one object, I simply can type in the lock command, and now that object grays out because it can no longer be selected. If I want to unlock it, same but backwards. I want to unlock, and now it's selectable again. So I can lock layers, which lock up everything on the layer, or I can lock individual objects. The print width, this is one of the areas that we're going to modify immediately in your new diagramming exercise. So what we're going to do is change the default. Everything is set originally at the default, and we're going to change them to all of these different line weights, some of these different line weights. So as you have set up your diagrams into primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of importance hierarchically, we're going to give them commensurate levels of thickness in the line weight. So my primary objects, we're going to start off testing a 0.08 line weight. That'll be pretty heavy. And then for the secondary, that'll be the primary object. For the secondary object, we can try a 0.06. And for the tertiary object, we can try a 0.03. And you've also drawn axes and regulating lines on your diagrams. And we will have separate layers for those objects because they are the lightest objects of all. So on those guiding line layers, we're going to select maybe a 0.18 as our line weight for, let's go ahead and say if this was axes and regulating lines. So that would be a good line weight. And we can stretch these if I can't, I need a longer title or something like that. But I'm going to change each one of these to be representing or indicating a kind of line weight that's appropriate for the elements that are on that layer. The next column is line type. And most of your lines, you're going to select the continuous line type. All that is a solid line in whatever your print color is. But if I click the drop-down menu, I have several options. I have border lines, center lines, dash dot lines, dashed lines, dotted lines, and hidden lines. Some of these, when we go into later commands, are going to be generated automatically. But for now, where you're controlling what's on the layer, we're going to go ahead and change those as well. So axes and regulating lines, those are actually require two different line types. So even though I have them on the same layer, I can control everything on the layer with these layer settings, but I can also control individual objects. But let's say that I called everything on the axis and regulating line layer to be dashed. And now you can see that I've got a dashed line. That red layer has now turned into a dashed line. And you might just want to sort of cycle through to see what those look like. The dotted line, the dots are pretty close together. We can't really tell. The hidden line, it's a very short dash. The dash dot, we'd have to zoom in pretty well, but you can see the dash dot. We have the center line is basically a dash with an extended line, similar a little bit to the dash dot. The border line, I'm not sure when you would exactly use that. For the main layers, we're going to have the continuous lines. So this is how we're going to begin to modify some of these basic characteristics of the layers in Rhino. You'll have instructions on specifically how to set them up in the assignment, and that will help you get the kind of outputs and line qualities that you want. So now I just want to show you how those layers look now that I've modified them. So as indicated in the assignment, you should give each of your primary layers a name that characterizes what is on that layer. Maybe it's what the objects are like, or what their role is in the composition, what their shapes look like, what their ordering principles are. So I've just chosen a couple of random ideas that come from, I'll show you the image that we're working with. This is the image that you have on the assignment. And I chose from the assignment rotational clamp, looking at this sort of two-part figure that almost has a sort of clamping geometry, but also has a little bit of a kind of bite in between those two elements. And then anchor, I'm going to call these things which are kind of in the background but really hold on to the other objects, some kind of an anchor. And then radial field is my tertiary level of hierarchy. And you can see in this background layer I've got lots of little indications of circular figures and radii that begin to construct different kind of geometric organization of the other figures. So that's my radial field. And again, those represent the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of hierarchy that I've selected for the composition. And accordingly, I've given them different print widths. The primary is going to get a 0.8, the secondary is going to get a 0.6, and the tertiary is going to get a 0.3. For each of those, as I construct this diagram, I'm only going to put the major figures on the individual layer because I want to separate out the regulating lines and the axes onto their own layer, because then I can actually make them a much lighter weight line. So I have for my rotational clamp, I have a layer for the rotational regulating lines and axes. For the anchor layer, I have an anchor regulating lines and axes. And for the radial field, I have the radial regulating lines and axes. And then the final layer is going to be the image underlay. I have this object, which I've put in the Perry-Culper image that I'm going to draw right on top of, and that's my image underlay. So when I place that object, I'm going to come in, I want to get it to my 5x8 size, and then right now it's active, so it's not allowing me to lock the image because it wants me to draw on that layer. If I change layers, I have the option to lock that layer, and I really don't want this image moving around, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that. Now that Culper image can't be moved, nor the box. I originally drew a box around where I wanted to place the Culper image, and that can't be moved either. So go ahead and as you place your object, I would recommend drawing first a box, and I would draw it 5x8. That'll help you in the placement. And then I would also sort of check what the size of that box is, just to double check. If I go in here and I use the dimension tool, that is not 5, which means the proportions of this object are not quite right, but I know that this one is 8. So this one is not quite a 5x8 composition, but I want to keep that 8-inch true. So draw a 5x8, and then as you bring in your object, you can basically drag to size the object right into the box.